So this user is asking why in a previous video I say I find faux fur less ethical than real fur. Now I do want to preface this by saying I don't always think this is the situation, and I acknowledge that sometimes it's a lot more practical to use faux fur. Like, I'm a furry who fursuits. There's no reality in which I think that using real fur on a fursuit is a good idea. Not to mention with some species, it makes way more sense to have something that's fake compared to the real thing. Like bats, we are literally going to drive to extinction if we keep buying real articles like this as opposed to fake bats. Now when it comes to using real fur versus faux fur, honestly, I don't have an apples to apples comparison, so take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. One reason I'm not really big on faux fur is because of what it's made out of. Faux fur is mostly comprised of acrylic. In other words, it's made of plastic. It's derived from drilling for oil. Oil drilling causes direct environmental destruction and further environmental pollution. And then we have to process that oil in order to get faux fur. This process creates literal toxic waste, and overall it's just not very eco-friendly. Once the faux fur is worn, it actually will produce microplastics either through normal wear and tear or when you wash it. As we know, microplastics are not great for the environment or the animals that live in it, including us. Finally, when that faux fur piece inevitably gets thrown away, it takes a long time for it to decompose, and as it's decomposing, it's not that great for the environment. This isn't to let real fur off the hook either. Most real fur items that you're going to find on the market, like for clothing and such, are going to be coming from farmed animals. Farming has its own ecological and ethical issues, especially when you're raising an animal that's a predator, such as a mink or a fox, who are going to need to consume other animals in order to survive. Even for herbivores like rabbits, animals are still passing away for their food, just indirectly. When you're plowing a field, it's impossible to make sure that all the animals are going to be out of the way. The animals are going to be passing away for the fur product, which is its own ethical concern, and then they're going to be tanned using harsh chemicals. Now, as far as I'm aware, wearing a fur product, or a leather product for that matter, isn't usually harmful. Sometimes the chemicals can be bad, but usually it's not an issue as long as you keep them dry or as long as they're not starting to corrode or decompose. As they break down, once they're thrown away, they are going to more readily break down if they're in the correct environment for it, but they are going to still be leaching those tanning chemicals into the environment, which isn't ideal. So both have their ups and downs, but there's one other aspect that I think is important to remember when it comes to choosing faux fur versus real fur. This right here is a real fox fur jacket that I inherited from my grandmother. If something were to happen to this, like it got dirty, it got a stain on it, the lining started to tear, it would be more cost effective for me to repair this coat than it would be to buy a new one, because buying a new one could cost like $1,200 to $2,000, and I just don't have that kind of money. It's going to be impossible to tell on video, but this is a jacket that has a faux fur lining, so fake fur lining, and I got this as a gift, but it probably cost about $30 brand new. This jacket's only been worn a handful of times, and the lining on both sides is completely ripped up. When it comes to repairing this, I have to decide, is it really worth my time and effort to repair a jacket that I could probably just replace for $30? Usually, no, it's not. One of the big advantages of faux fur is that faux fur items are easy to mass produce and they're cheaper to purchase for the consumer. As such, there's a higher likelihood for them to be used and then thrown away when it's inconvenient to fix them, as opposed to being kept in a family like that coat that I had for my grandmother. This isn't to say that faux fur items are necessarily innately bad, it's just how we treat them. Like on the flip side, you could say the same thing about fur trinkets, like little keychains or lucky rabbit's feet. Those oftentimes are going to be used for a little bit and then thrown away. At the end of the day, you're going to have to decide which one is more ethical to you and which one you feel more comfortable supporting. For me, rather than buying a brand new fur coat or a brand new faux fur coat, I would much rather go buy a second-hand coat of either quality. And then, once I have that real fur coat or faux fur coat, it makes more sense to me to keep repairing it and keep it in use as long as possible. That's why a lot of my personal collection comes from animals that are seen as pests by people, animals that people readily shoot and then discard. I would much rather see these animal remains be used, especially used for educational purposes, as opposed to just being left out to rot. At the end of the day, whether you're buying real fur or faux fur, make sure that you look into the issues surrounding both, and make sure that you're really checking in with your feelings and your ethical beliefs to see that you're supporting what you truly believe in.